I'm your host, Jessica Shockley, and this is the Bold Foundations Podcast. The information shared in this podcast, Bold Foundations, is for informational and inspirational purposes only. While we discuss strategies for shifting your mindset to cultivate a more positive and fulfilling life, this podcast is not a substitute for professional, medical, psychological, or therapeutic advice. If you have specific mental health concerns or medical conditions, we encourage you to seek guidance from a qualified healthcare professional. Everyone's journey is unique, and professional support can provide personalized assistance tailored to your needs. By listening to this podcast, you acknowledge that myself, the host, and any guests on future or past episodes are sharing personal insights and general information, not medical or psychological advice. Always prioritize your well-being and consult a professional when necessary. Ouch! Don't let your insurance company add to the pain in your neck. It's time to lawyer up with Shockley Polino Personal Injury Attorneys. Store 727-498-8771 in your phone now. That's 727-498-8771. Offices St. Petersburg, Clearwater. On this episode of the Bold Foundations podcast, boldly pushing forward to confidence, Lauren's story. Lauren, or as her friends call her, LC, joins me to share her extraordinary story of confidence. But like all of us, she had to work hard to feel that way today. She shares stories of resilience through self-realization, emotional intelligence, and forgiveness that will have you in awe of her journey. Little Lauren's world was rocked when she learned at a young age that she was actually adopted. The initial feelings of abandonment and anger led her down a path of allowing negative labels to become her. Once she stripped everything away, she started to love herself and others as a wife, mother, mentor to teens, and friend. To me, the most beautiful part of these stories is Elsie's ability to see beyond herself. She had the awareness to recognize generational trauma and postpartum depression in generations before her. By understanding and forgiving, she broke cycles and is giving herself permission to wake up happier now every day for it. Please note, this episode touches on some sensitive topics like addiction, abuse, and self-harm. If you or someone you know is in need of help, reach out to the American Psychological Association's crisis text line. Text HOME to 741-741. So I'm here today with Lauren, or more commonly known as LC. Hi, Lauren.
Hi.
Thanks for joining me today.
Yes, thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
Yes. So give everyone who is listening just a little introduction about yourself, who you are, and tell me about what life is like for you today.
Let me think here. I am a very confident woman. And it's taken me a long time to get there. And I've struggled most of my life and have been hitting 40 here soon and just feel like I have come to a place where I am happy. I wake up happy. I go to bed happy. I watch toddlers during the day. I have tons of plants. I'm a chicken person. I have chickens out the wazoo at my home. I'm on Parks and Rec at Lower Allen Township. I've come a long way. So,
I love that.
yeah.
And I love that off the gate, when I asked you to give an introduction, your first thing to say was that I'm a confident woman. I think oftentimes when someone is asked to give some sort of introduction or someone asks, "Who are you?" they say, "Well, I'm a mom," or "This is my job title." But it's like, that's not really who you are. You know,
Right.
your 9 to 5 or your role in the home is not who you are. So I think
Ex-
that's really cool that you started off that way.
yeah, exactly. And that's always been a big thing for me is I can be a lot for some people. And I've learned at a a couple years ago, a lot of people are taken back from me being a confident woman. It's not that I'm, not out to hurt anyone. I just say what's on my mind, and it's not, I'm not mean about it, and I like to just put that out there. Like I am confident. I'm strong. It takes a lot to break me at this point. So, and just I am a mom and, I have a whole life, but that's not me. That's the life I live and I cherish, but it's not me as a person. It's a very small piece of
Yeah.
who I am.
So I know from talking to you prior to this interview briefly, you had shared with me that you do some work in the community to help others. Can you share a little bit about the work that you're doing?
Yes, actually, I was working with a group. Unfortunately, it ended with COVID. Um, but I'm trying to look to get restarted. I've reached out to a couple people, is working with teen girls and how to build up their confidence at that vulnerable age. I feel like it's a very important age where the support system needs to be there, as well as I feel like for women, I'd like to go on the journey with like women going through menopause and everyone not having to feel shunned about what they're talking about, but being able to just have a women's group and talk about those things, I feel like is empowering. So from the teen years up to women going through menopause or any age, I feel like it's very important for us women to get together.
I agree. I think that's where we connected, that we have a lot of similar mindset on that particular topic.
Yes.
So, helping teens, share with me kind of how that came about and why that particular topic really is resonates with you and why it's important to you.
Um, Teens are, well, I'll say I was a hot mess teen. I was the teen that nobody wanted in their house, unfortunately. And it was a long drawn out thing. It was things that happened in my childhood that I didn't understand what were happening. I tell people I was put here on this earth to survive, and I really was. My birth mother, she gave me up at 2. She was very young, and I feel like, dealt with postpartum, and she tried to kill me as well as herself at one point. So I was adopted by my grandparents at 2. By 9, I met her for the first time in a mental hospital, which was traumatizing. Because I'm thinking, I'm excited. I made up these lies in my head. Like, she's this famous person. My biological dad has to be this like lawyer in California. You know how kids do. Um, and I met her in a mental hospital. She was dealing with borderline personality disorder at that time. So when I talked to her there, and this goes into my teens, is I remember her saying to me, "You have a sister." And that's when that abandonment hit. I walked out of that place so angry. I was scared to go in there. I was scared when I met her, but then I walked out angry. And I was 9, 10 years old, I think I was. And at that point, that's when the behavior started at school. I didn't trust women for the longest time. And that's one of the reasons I think it's good for women to have women. Um, but yeah, a lot of the behaviors, I would steal, I would lie. I didn't even know why I was doing it sometimes. At times was doing it just because I don't know if I was calling for help in a way. My grandparents were amazing people. We grew up in a Lutheran church. I had lots of friends at church. However, they were my grandparents, and I feel like the generation part of it was different. They raised 6 kids before me, and I was actually their seventh, but they come to realize by the time I turned a teenager, they couldn't raise me like they raised their other 6. My dad would often joke that I was like the cherry on top. So the teenage years. So when I work with teen girls, I realized I had to look at myself and I was like, why who was I as a teen? And I was not a good person. I had some good friends that were female. Two of them that I wish I would have been a little better to through my teenage years. They visited me because I dealt with eating disorders and I was also a active cutter. Um, and they would visit me in the hospitals because I would put myself in hospitals to get away from everything. That was like almost my vacation. Um, and I realized through all of that, and as growing as an adult in my teen years, I didn't have the confidence. I was put on this world to survive. I got labeled, oh, she's adopted, she's an IEP kid, she has these issues, and I just kind of took on those titles. And I feel like titling is not always the best sometimes. Um, but back to me as a teen, like I said, I had an eating disorder. I was a cutter. I I had more guy friends. I had a best friend that was a guy, and I think it's because I didn't have to talk. We could sit there and work on an engine together, or we could just drive around and cause, ruckus. Um, and I left my home at 18 years old, which you're an adult then, and I signed myself out of high school my senior year of high school. And I decided I was going to live my life. And ended up in York somehow, and I went through all these different aspects down there that I can't imagine how I survived them. Um, I was gang raped. I was put in a women's shelter. I had all my stuff stolen from me. I ended up living with people and then doing, we'll say, favors for people just to make money. And it was survival at that point. It was what I needed to do. Um, and being 18 and having a daughter now, I cannot imagine my daughter going through that. Um, there was no self-love, there was no confidence, there was nothing. At this point, it was who can I use to survive the next night? Um, then one day I walked into a church, which was almost comical because I was so against growing up in a Lutheran church. You had these rules that you followed, you went by them, and I walk in this church. I'm like, why am I in here? I'm not a fan of these. I walked in and I was like, you know what? I need to go home. This is what I need to do. And I went home, and my parents were not, my dad did not want me home. He was the type that if you left home, you left home. You figure it out. And my mom was the type, she's like, let's just do it. She's saying she'll sign herself back into school. And that's what I did. So I signed myself back into school. I went back to school not knowing anybody, from being someone who was very social and knowing everyone in the school to not going back. Um, I had to fight my way in school for getting out of learning support and putting myself saying, I want regular ed. I can do this. I put myself in emotional support with behavior kids and felt like, okay, I belong here because this is where I feel like I should be. So yeah, the teenage years, when you talk to young girls, it's easy to put on a mask every day. And you can do your makeup and you can do your hair. And I think what really got me is when I went back to high school, I shaved my hair. Went to Goodwill and I found these clothes that were absolutely hideous. I don't know why I picked them, but I did. But I wanted people to like me for me. And when I did that, I met my husband of class of 2005, and we've been together since because he always says, he goes, I fell in love with the ugly duckling who turned into the beautiful swan. And I said, I don't know if that's a compliment or not, but I get what you're saying, because I was broken and I shaved my head and I took a year from dating and being with anyone and just kind of worked on myself at such a young age.
Yeah,
And
that's what I'm thinking as you're saying this. To have a level of emotional intelligence at such a young age to say, I want someone to love me for me and to physically strip everything else away to be that raw. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah, I got tired of wearing that mask, and that's what I want to show the girls is like you don't have to follow what everyone's doing or feel like you have to fake who you are because those people that are going to be in your life are going to be in your life regardless, no matter if you screw up or not, because they're your people. So you don't need to fake a mask and try to be friends with all these different types of people. And then with teens, I feel like their home life can be difficult. I didn't have my grandparents were amazing, um, which I call them mom and dad, but they were phenomenal. But where they lacked, unfortunately, was I didn't have someone to talk to. They both were raised in a home where they weren't allowed to express their feelings. They raised the other six not to express their feelings. So I didn't express my feelings. I acted out. I couldn't tell my parents that I was raped or sexually assaulted at school because when I did, I was the bad person, I felt like, and that I need to keep my mouth shut. Um, and it took me years to realize they just weren't given the tools at that time, and that's a
Can I
tool
just
that,
say that's also incredible that you were able to have that understanding and forgiveness for them because I could see how easily someone could just continue to feel anger.
yes. And I think because they are people that my mom fought for me from all the therapy she drove me to, all the medications that she would put me on. My diagnosis ended up being borderline personality disorder, which is the same thing my biological mom had when her mother walked out on her. It was a generational thing. Every mother, until me, I broke that generation thing. Um, but my mom, not a grandma mom, it's hard to sometimes explain. She fought tooth and nail. She took me to a therapy called dialectical behavior therapy. And that was the best therapy I could have had. One, because it was a man, because I had those, even though I was hurt by men, I was never abandoned by a man. Um, and that therapy teaches you how to retrain your mind. It's not one that's like, oh, let's just talk about your feeling. It's literally saying, okay, when you feel like cutting, what can you do otherwise? And yes, we all know the thing, oh, I can journal, I can this, but no, like you're in that moment and you're looking at yourself in the mirror and there's tears coming down your face. What can you do? So I taught myself to say three things that I love about myself and look myself in the mirror. And I was able to stop that behavior, we'll say. So it is what my mom went through was phenomenal. And I don't know how she did it after raising six kids. And my dad he was very strict, but he came around. He really, for a long time, they grew up in a home where he would get spankings. He got the belt, and I got the belt. My siblings, most of them got the belt. And I remember getting the belt one time, and I was a lot older, and I was like, this is child abuse. So I called children and youth on my family. And I did that, and at the time, I felt fine doing it, and I was okay with it. And they called and they talked to my dad, and they said, you can't do the belt. But the funny thing about it is everyone grew from that. My mom was able to have a voice again. My dad and I actually started having conversations. And when I was able to actually conversate with him, instead of feeling judged or knowing I'm going to get in trouble, that's when I realized it was like my going uphill battle at that point.
How old were you when you called?
I was probably 16 or 15 years old. And like I said, it wasn't that he was a bad guy. He grew up in he was a state cop. He was a very good, like his dad was strict. And apparently my dad was too. And don't think he ever meant to hurt any of his kids because he loved us, and but I do think it taught him how to talk, and I think it talked to him about communication. And he was, I it taught him a lot, really. And then I remember one time him asking me, "Do you regret anything you did?" And I was probably about 19. I said, "Absolutely not. I don't regret anything I did." I said, "I went literally where no place most 18-year-olds go, and I've survived it. And I'm here and I've learned so much. I don't, before I was kind of one of those judgmental girls, I guess we'll say. Like I kind of like judged anyone. I felt like I had everything. I was, yep, I live in the White House on the Hill. My dad drives that type of person. Where when I came back, I looked at people a whole different way. And I was able to look at someone and be like, you know what? I don't know their home life, but they're struggling. And I just need to look at them and say, are you okay? Or just wave hi or smile at them. So that was
Yeah.
a big step, which is why teens are important.
I keep thinking back to you. It's so remarkable the strength and emotional intelligence that you had sort of in the moment, where a lot of adults don't really have that realization looking back until much later in life. And I'm curious, you said that you met your mom at 9, and that's where you sort of had this shift in your behavior. Tell me about prior to 9. Was it a happy life without negative feelings to your mom? Do you attribute your emotional intelligence and strength because you had 8 or 9 years of this solid foundation, or what are your thoughts on that?
Um, well, it's funny, I did not know I was adopted. My dad made a rule to all the siblings and said, you are now her sisters and brothers. You're no longer her aunts and uncles, and we're not telling her she's adopted. Um, I don't remember much of that time. I can look back on photos and I remember looking at back at them and I'm like, wow, I was genuinely happy. Like there's this playfulness. And I still talk to that little girl because I call her little Lauren, because those are the times that I'm like, there's purity there. And it's almost like I feel like everyone grows like that till something happens to them, almost kind of like an apple going bad. And unfortunately, most people do go through things. It can be something so little, but to one person, maybe just their parents being divorced. But to some people, that's a big thing. It doesn't matter. There's no scale saying whose is worse and whatnot. Everyone goes through something. Everybody's core gets a little damaged, unfortunately. Um, but I go back in that time frame and I think I was so happy. And then I remember asking my mom, did I come from your belly? And she'd not really answer me. She'd be like, no, because she didn't want to lie to me. So finally, I kept pushing it, and they bought me this book that says, "Where did I come from?" And I'm like, why am I getting a book? Who gets a book of where they come from? I think I come from your belly. But it explained the adoption. And I was like, I'm adopted. This is a cool label. This is exciting. Like I have something nobody else has. So here I'm excited. And then I wanted to meet her. Now, at that point, my dad had already, unfortunately, written her off. Um, I think because of behaviors and stuff that she was showing, because it was supposed to be an open adoption, but she just still was not stabilizing. Um, and he really had a hard time with it. But my mom ended up, she worked at Polyclinic Hospital at the time, and that's where my birth mother was at. And she made a thing where we could come see her. And I was scared. I was scared of her. I remember sitting there and I remember the way that room looks and smells like it's a core memory. Um, and yeah, it just kind of, I want to say it was like you could almost see the shift, happening because I literally came out of there and I remember feeling all these emotions. I'm like, why does she keep my sister? Who am I? Like, what? You just gave me up? You didn't even fight for me? I didn't know all this stuff. I'm a kid. And I'm like, but she kept her, and that was hard, and for many years I have a relationship with my birth mother, but it has been so up and down for many years till I finally could heal and accept her for who she was, because she's a wonderful, big-hearted person. But she's also going through a lot in her life, and you can see that when you talk to her, meet her, or something like that. But yeah.
Do you know how old you were when you recognized that the driving force behind her not keeping you was the postpartum and it was something she couldn't control?
I actually 2 years ago,
Wow.
2 years ago, I shut her out and I said, I am done. I can't do this anymore. And it wasn't because she did anything to me. It was more of just seeing things on Facebook of like, oh, look at my grandkids because she got married, and I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I have grandkids, you never come around. And it would little things that would just eat me up. And it was like, why am I never picked? Why am I still second in your life? Why am I never the first thing? So when I ended up doing this whole Reiki session and I couldn't make it through. And I'm like, why can't I make it through? And I had to do it 4 times because literally every time it was like a guard would come up and I would just cry.
Can you
And
explain to people listening who don't know what Reiki is, what that sort of experience is like?
yes, it is an experience. It's almost like an outer body experience. You are going through almost like a video of your life. That's how I took it. They cleansed, they cleanse your mind, your heart, your throat, like all the chakras. And I'm going through it and I'm seeing there's little Lauren. Here's the adoption time. Here's this time she let you down again, and it's like time after time. Here's a time. I remember one time my birth mother bought me all these beautiful snow globes, and I loved snow globes when I was a kid. And I ended up breaking all of them because I was so angry, but I didn't want to be angry at her, but I was angry, I think, at the whole concept and not understanding. And I still felt like there were secrets being kept from me. Um, so I went through it and I broke through and I was like, I remember seeing her face and I'm like, I forgive you and it's okay. Because I realized nobody knew about postpartum back then. Everyone kept shoving her off and, oh, she's going through this and here's her crazy birth mother going through that. And it was kind of sad because she didn't have a support system. She really was not given a choice. She was kicked out of the house. She lived at different places. She had me moved all the way to Washington State with her mother, who abandoned her. So when her mother found her and what was going on with me, because she's the one that found us both, she called her first husband, which is my granddad slash dad, and he said, bring her home. And that's when the adoption started taking place. They let her live there for a little bit, and then they slowly moved her out, and I was living there, and then papers were signed. But 2 years ago, I remember thinking, I'm like, why am I so mad at her? She was just as broken as I was, except she just has a different story. And that's not fair to her. It's not fair to me what happened, but it's not her fault. She tried. She tried for 2 years, but nobody could actually see her going through. And the more I read about things and having my own kids, I'm like, she dealt with postpartum. She had postpartum that nobody back in the 80s really talked about or knew about. And she was severely, severely depressed. Because when I talked to her about it, because I said, hey, I'm going to be doing this podcast, I want to talk to you a little bit. She said, I was depressed. I didn't want to live. And then she goes, and for years, I just cry out to you. I just want my baby. And I remember my little sister saying to me, she goes, I'm right here. Like she had no idea I was even existing at that point. She goes, I just look at her. I'm like, I'm right here. What are you crying for? Because she was holding on to so much.
Yeah, I mean, postpartum for people who have not experienced it is it takes a hold of you.
Mm-hmm.
And it is scary because sometimes I think you can recognize that it's happening And sometimes you don't understand what's happening, but you know that you have these thoughts and feelings that aren't good.
Right. Yeah, I had postpartum with my daughter, not as bad as hers, but I could tell that something just wasn't right. And I kept talking to people about it. And I was like, I just feel like I can't love her. Like what's going on? Like it was odd. Um, and I kept forcing myself to play with. Like I was like, okay, I'm forcing myself to be her mother. I'm forcing myself to be here with it. It's gotta do it. And then by the time I had my next appointment when I was gonna say something, I was like, I'm not worried about that. It was almost
Yeah.
like I had to really play a mind game in my head with that.
Yeah, and I don't know how p much people realize how common postpartum is. I think because it can feel shameful
Hmm.
to say that you're having these thoughts where, I can speak from personal experience. I had postpartum with all three. They were all different experiences. But the last one, I lost I loved her, but I lost that connection where I wanted to hold her. I mean, I sat her in a chair a lot, in her little chair instead of holding her. And I would say that lasted my whole maternity, a
Yeah,
long time.
yeah,
And it feels, you don't want to say that to people because you almost feel like a bad mother. So I
right.
think that there's a lot of people who suffer in silence with that.
Yes. Yeah. And that's another like women's thing that I feel like women just need women. Because if it wasn't for the women that I talked to during that time, where they said, oh, yeah, I went through that, just make sure
Mhm.
you're not like wanting to harm yourself or whatever, but this is normal. It's okay. If you
Yeah.
feel like you're going to be harmful, talk to a doctor, but it's okay. It's normal. Because I'm
Yeah.
like, gosh, am I a bad mom? Am I this? It's like your mind starts playing these games where you're thinking, gosh, like, am I this horrible person?
No, we just have chemicals and hormones going crazy at that time.
Right.
Your
That we
body
have
is
no
going
control.
through so much.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have gone through, you had this beautiful, pure, innocent 8 to 9 years, this foundation that was laid out for you.
Hmm.
You went through a really difficult shift in your life when you realized you were adopted and met your birth mother, and then lived the next, would you say, about 8 or more years where you really went through a lot of challenging situations and trauma. If you could, what would you say you contributed to the shift to pull yourself out? Was it going back into the church that day, or what was the real shift in you to change how you were going to live your life?
Um, I can't say it was the church. Um, though I think that might have been something key ponent there. I can't really explain what I felt during that time. I just remember finally feeling like I can do this, like I can climb out. Um, I would say it was my second senior year of high school, um, where I met my husband and realized that I am able to be loved, and I could not understand why he loved me with a shaved head or anything like that. I was like, I'm going to therapy. Here I'm broken, and he knew. Like I was like, I'm gonna just be honest with you. I'm trying to heal myself. And I remember telling him, I'm like, I don't want to have sex for a whole year. I don't want to do this. Like I fall in love too quickly. And he waited with me. He said, literally was by my side that complete time. And I think that's knowing that somebody could actually do that and still find me beautiful and love me for who I was made me start to have that confidence start to build.
Yeah.
And I would say also with that is my one sister who basically took on that birth mother role. So she's the one who, as a kid, she taught me how to ride a bike. She taught me how to wear a tampon. She taught me how to swim. She was the mom that I couldn't have, but she was also the role model that I needed. Um, and all my siblings really were. I literally, like, I look at myself in the mirror and I can find all my siblings in me. So when people ask me who I am, I'm literally, I'm me, but I'm a product of me. Because I have quirks of like each one of my sisters, and I have quirks of my brothers. You know, if I'm out working on cars like my one brother, or if I'm having a kind of like a Buddhist retreat with my sister, you know, it's almost like a whole spectrum of colorfulness, but that is all things that each one of those siblings have taught me. And there are things that I obviously hold close to me and have made it to be a part of me because I literally had to sew myself up, almost like a doll.
Isn't it interesting? And I don't think interesting is even the right word. I mean, just how powerful it is that the power of kindness and understanding, how much that can impact someone else's life. And
Yes.
if more people just took the time to really see someone for who they are and understand a little bit more of where they came from and giving them that love and grace and kindness. I mean, to hear you say that that was a turning point for you because of your now husband, that's that's huge.
Yes. Yeah. Kindness goes such a long way. And I always make sure, like, when I go out to a store, I always try to smile. I always try to make sure that I can smile or I say hi to someone. I don't need to know, but you're seen, you know? And my kids make fun of me because we go out and they're like, why do people just tell you their stories? And I'm like, they just do because they need to tell it. They need to be able to tell that story to someone. And that tells me when someone comes up to me, and I can't tell you how many strangers I've come up to. I think the last one was at the battery store. This poor lady was just having a day, and she just needed to tell me it, you know. And sometimes it takes me by surprise, you know. And I'm like listening to the story, and I'm like, I looked at her and I said, "You're gonna be okay. It's okay." I said, "Sometimes you gotta realize there's setbacks that happen in life, like your battery dying, and you can't make it to this a wedding party in time and it's like this whole big thing, it seems like you're spiraling out of control. But in reality, you might have missed that time because you needed to miss that time. You needed that time maybe because something else was going to happen in the atmosphere that someone, I always say, like a guardian might have helped you, like a guardian angel. Or you needed that time because you needed a little bit more time before you walk somebody down the aisle. You know, you don't know at that point when you go through that, but you do know at one point why, you know what? I know why that happened. That was pretty cool. You know,
Yeah.
things happen for a reason.
I'd like to dig in a little bit more on the teenager aspect because you had shared that your grandparents, who you call mom and dad, just generationally weren't using this skill set for you two to have these open conversations. And I can say from speaking to different women and for myself, a reoccurring theme as a teenager is that that would have helped us so much if we had that. But as a parent, it can feel really challenging to have to show your teenager and have them truly believe it
Right.
that they can have those conversations. So I'm curious with your work with teens, what are your thoughts on that? Do you have any suggestions to parents to start those conversations?
Absolutely. I started with my own two who are in seventh and fifth grade, and now we're just getting into the teen years. But I've started with open communication at a time. I told them from the time they went to, we'll say, kindergarten, let me be your person. I got your back. Now, yes, I will hear you out, but if you're wrong, I'm not going to be mad that you're wrong. I'm going to be sad that you made a wrong choice, but I'm not going to be upset at you as a person. Hearing that speaks volumes to a teenager. Knowing that you didn't just crush your parents' soul, that they don't hate you or they just don't dislike you, that they're actually upset by that choice that you made, you're going to make mistakes and it's okay. And they're going to make mistakes, and you got to sometimes sit back and be like, you know what? It's okay. This is how we're going to fix it. This is what we need to do. And you got this. You're still a beautiful person, but you messed up. And
Yeah.
just because you messed up doesn't make you not beautiful. So, and I've taught my kids that from a young age. And I will say, my son's a little bit more easygoing. Like he'll come to me and say, I need to talk to you. So when something happens at school, he will come home and he will sit there and we'll have, a little bit of soda or something, whatever he wants to drink. And I said, let's talk. I'm listening because right now I'm listening to you, And then afterwards, I said, okay, give me a little bit. And I bring him back in and I say, look, I'm sad about the choice. You might have been messing around, something else happened. But I love you. And that's the big thing is if anytime you're having a disagreement with them, if you always say, I love you and I got you, I feel like that speaks volume. Because when my parents were angry with me, I didn't get that. I got sent to my room. And I mean, when I got sent to my room, there was no TV. Sometimes the door was off the TV or off the door. I had a book, which was usually a Bible, and you had to write a thing. And I was grounded like that for weeks sometimes. But at the end, I never really heard the I love you. I never heard, they wouldn't talk to me and go, okay, so you did this. Why did you do this? And then I got to the point where I was just like, I don't know.
Yeah.
You're not going to believe me anyway, so why tell you? Because we've already broken that.
Well, and that's the thing too. I think as a child, you know your parents, and inevitably we're all predictable most of the
Mhm.
times in
Right.
our actions. So you could say, I could assume that you could predict how your parents would react with certain things.
Hmm.
And I think to my teenager, he, in terms of open communication, he probably expects me, if he would come to me with a concern over something bad that happened to him, he would expect me to go into mama bear protective mode. I'm going to fight for you. But what I'm learning is that that's now creating a situation where he may only come to me when he wants that reaction because he can predict it. And to try to shift into more of a space where the communication is me just asking questions back to him to help guide him to work through these situations and learn the skills that he needs to learn for his life. And I'm curious if you feel the same way where you didn't want to share at that age because you could have predicted that behavior.
Yes, absolutely. I remember sitting there thinking, I'm like, do I go to this party and get grounded for a month? Or do I just tell everyone I'm grounded and that way I don't get in trouble at home? And I remember going to the party. I remember doing what I wanted to do, but I would also think it in my head, like, I know the consequences. So if I'm going to choose that consequence, okay.
Yeah.
I my parents wouldn't let me go to parties. They didn't let me listen to a certain type of music. And it was hard because you talk to your friends and they're like talking about stuff, and you never feel like such an outsider when your friends are talking about things and you're like, I have no idea what that means. And it's I get the helicopter or sheltering side of it because those are your babies. You're here to protect them. But at the same time, I feel like it's good to let them do some of the things. Not obviously, don't go out and drink, like I mean within reason. Let them be able to, like, I wasn't allowed to have a cell phone. I didn't have a cell phone until my second senior year because I kept bugging and bugging. And I'm like, all my friends have phones. And here I am, here, call me on my house phone. Again, to them, it wasn't a big deal. But to me, I'm like, oh, I'm going to get labeled this, and you hear the jokes at school. Well, let's call you on your house phone, Lauren, and I'm like, great. Yeah, that's fun. and it just keeps hitting you. So it is kind of like, don't be afraid to let them do the things, but when they do the things, make sure you're there for them. How was that party? Talk to me about it. What was going on? And because I've started that communication at such a young age, I sometimes think some of the things they tell me I shouldn't be knowing. But I'm thankful that they are comfortable enough to come to me. And that tells me that I'm doing a good job because again, like I said, I didn't have that.
Yeah. I
I
think
would
that's such a beautiful thing to be able to have communication like that with your kids. The amount of things that you can work through proactively with them and give them that skill set before they're an adult. That concludes part 1 of our episode with Elsie. Tune in next week for part 2, where we finish our conversation. Did this episode of Bold Foundations inspire you? Or can you relate? Maybe you have your own story to tell. Whether you want to share with me privately or you would like to be a guest on the podcast, reach out by going to boldfoundations.my.canva.site or follow us on Instagram at bold_foundations. And don't forget to leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks for listening.